tell me your name and where you were born and when, please.
Well, I was christened Catherine Frances Cheevers, and I was born in Bellevue Hospital in New York City on June 15th, 1924. My mother grew up in an orphanage, and so she had no experience with little children, and I guess I was the first baby she ever handled.
Yeah.
And so she would walk me around the block, and some people would stop and say, "Oh, she looks like a little doll." So I got the nickname of Dolly, which stuck with me for quite a long time. Unfortunately, I thought at that time. And so my mother would tell the story that she thought she'd crossed the street.
Yeah.
So she just used to walk around the block, and she didn't realize that when you get to the curb, you have to put the back wheels down.
Yeah.
So she put the front wheels down, and I went flying into the hood.
Uh-oh.
And then she got, like, semi-hysterical, I guess. People came and rescued her. And then she called my father at work. I told him anyhow. But, yeah, so that was kind of the thing. My mother was in labor for 33 hours.
Oh,
and
geez.
I swear to God, she never let me forget it. I mean, and probably even when she was 70, she would talk about, she would say that, she was in labor with me for 33 hours. So she would tell everybody. So it was something like she probably remembered for the rest of her life. And so when my brother was going to be born, she thought that was such a horrible experience at the hospital that she opted to have him at home. Now, I don't know how that went, but I know he never got the thing of how many hours she was in labor or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
So, anyhow.
So, and then you lived in Manhattan, right? When you were young?
When you were younger. In Manhattan. And I checked in the 80s, I believe, like around York Avenue.
Yeah.
First Avenue, and then I possibly was too young to remember, but my mother said, well, my father was an accountant at Con Edison in New York, Con Sal, and he was going to school at night to be an accountant, CPA rather. He had been in World War I as a 17-year-old, but when he got there, it was almost actually over, so he really didn't get into any of the fighting. But he had written letters to his sister, how lonesome he was, and so forth and so on. So I really don't know the circumstances, but he wound up in a VA hospital. My mother said it was like with a nervous breakdown. And that was in Northport, Long Island. He had the run of the grounds, and so that he was not, had to be isolated or anything. And my mother would just take me out to see him sometimes. She felt my brother was too young. I don't know, maybe I was 6, but I remember going out, and when we got to the, we'd have to take an train somewhere, and then probably a bus, or maybe the Long Island Railroad, I guess. So, but anyhow, when we go into the grounds, there were like balconies outside many of the buildings, but they were screened in all the way up, and there were men walking up and down and smoking and talking to themselves and stuff. It's a kind of vivid memory, and I guess then they probably called it shell shocked, but now it would probably be the
PTSD.
Yeah, right. But,
yeah, probably.
So,
yeah.
But he was never able to come out and back to the real world. And so he died of a strep throat when he was 37. And I never believed that he died of a strep throat, because who dies of a strep throat, you know?
Right.
Until I saw the death certificate. But, so then, yeah. He's buried in St. John's Cemetery in, I think it's out Queens. But at any rate, things are, while he was gone, I think I don't know if my mother got anything from the government, because he was hospitalized or not, but she had no family to back her up really, and so she was really a kind of a nervous person, and she would get these feelings of like she was going to pass out and have to run to the drugstore and get some spirits of ammonia and leave me and to bring my brother across the street, First Avenue or York Avenue, but we had a childhood that was, although we lived in a railroad flat, Coldwater Railroad flat, had an ice box, and our heat was a little potbelly stove in the kitchen. We shared a bathroom with the person living opposite us. There were only two families on the floor, and so I don't know where my mother washed, but she bathed us in these tubs that people have in the basement, you know.
Yeah.
But in the mornings, then when all the it was then with the depression, we would have breakfast, get dressed. We go to Carl Schurz Park, which is on top of the East Side Drive, near the mayor's house, and we'd play there, and then with some friends, and she would. Then everybody would go home and have lunch, and their kids would rest, you know, and go back in the afternoon. And although you would classify us as poor, I guess. If my mother and her best friend, who had one child about my age, would go, they'd kind of save some money, I guess, and for a nickel you could take a subway down to Coney Island, and stay at the beach all day, and us kids would sneak under the turnstile. So, and then from in New York, you could walk anywhere. You know, walk over to the zoo.
Yeah.
And museums and stuff like that. I think the museums were free then, but so it wasn't. And I think. And she got help from the Salvation Army with clothing, and I remember one new dress she brought home. It had a big white like collar on it. I don't know how old I was, but I just remember that. And sometimes she said we just had a can of soup for supper, which, you know, if you add enough water or milk and whatever, you can make it go for 3 people, especially if 2 were kids. But the girl across the street from me, my friend had, she used to have bread and gravy for supper, and I thought that was so great until I realized that that's all she had. You know, it's, I think if you were maybe a little more affluent or something, or not even, or medium class, you would kind of know that, you know, people don't usually eat just bread and gravy, but and as a child I just didn't realize. But during the Depression, then we could walk over to Central Park, and there was almost like a tent city set up for people who were homeless, and people would go and, you know, leave food if they could, stuff like that. So, but
oh wait.
all right. So one time when we came home from the park, my mother said someone tried to break in, and so she was kind of frightened. And so we moved up to the Bronx, and to a big area with old tenement houses, and we had luxury of steam heat, our own bathroom, and hot water.
Your own bathroom just for, you mean that you shared with your brother and your mom?
No, I mean, we had like a 3-room apartment, but we shared the bathroom, with our family. Our family had their own bathroom, right. And then they had, in those days, they had bakeries, they had butcher shops, and they had vegetable stores. And my mother would go over to to the butcher shop, and I guess she would get some chopped meat. And he would always give us a piece of bologna, this one butcher. So the one day my mother sent us over with a note and to what she wanted, and so he gave it. And he said, on our way out, he said, ask your mother if I sent a steak over, would she cook it for me? Great pickup line. So anyhow, she said yes, and then they started dating, and he